No one was talking to the disabled alien woman, but a human came and sat next to her. The grand atrium of the Xandrian Hegemony was a cathedral of cold, unyielding light, where the worth of a soul was measured by the perfect symmetry of their biometrics. Elara sat in the far corner, a deliberate vacuum of space surrounding her chair. Her lower left ocular implant flickered with a rhythmic, dull crimson light, a technical glitch that signaled her status as damaged goods to every passing aristocrat. In a society that pruned its population like a prize garden, she was a weed, invisible and untouchable. Then, the heavy vibration of a human footfall shook the polished marble floor. Unlike the skittering, light grace of the hegemony, this sound was rhythmic and unapologetically heavy. A human male, broad-shouldered with a jawline like carved granite, walked directly through the social dead zone. He didn't look for permission or scan the room for social cues. He simply pulled out the chair beside her, the wood scraping loudly against the silence of the hall. "This seat taken, or is everyone in this room just afraid of the best view in the house?" Atticus asked, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated through the table and into Elara's very bones. Elara turned her head, her organic eye widening while the mechanical one spasmed in a frantic attempt to calibrate his heat signature. Humans were considered a Tier 3 species, blunt and lacking the telepathic nuances of high court politics, yet this man sat with a casual dominance that made the surrounding lords look like nervous children. He didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her with a predatory, appreciative heat. "I am Elara," she whispered, her voice rusty from hours of forced silence. "I'm Atticus, and I've spent the last hour watching you ignore these peacocking idiots," he replied, leaning closer until she could smell the scent of expensive sandalwood and the raw, vibrant musk of a predator. He reached out, his hand large and calloused, and placed it over her trembling fingers. The contact was electric, a sudden surge of biological warmth that her cybernetics couldn't calculate. In a world of cold perfection, his touch was a searing, wonderful intrusion of reality. His thumb traced the line of her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers as the high-pitched chatter of the gala faded into a distant hum. Atticus's shoulder brushed hers, a deliberate claim of space that sent a shiver racing down her spine. The hegemony guests began to whisper, their telepathic subchannels likely buzzing with the scandal of a human consorting with a glitch. But Atticus didn't give them a glance. He was entirely focused on the way Elara's breath hitched, his gaze dropping to her lips before returning to her mismatched eyes. "You have no idea how much more interesting you are than anything else in this zip code," Atticus said, his smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "They say I am a broken circuit, Atticus," she murmured, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Then I've always had a thing for high-voltage shorts," he replied, his hand moving from her fingers to the sensitive, pale skin of her inner wrist. He leaned even closer, the heat radiating from his chest making her dizzy. Elara felt a strange, forbidden pride swelling in her chest as the most powerful men in the room watched a primitive, human treat her like the most precious jewel in the sector. Atticus stood up abruptly, but he didn't let go of her hand, instead tugging gently to bring her to her feet. "Let's get out of here. I want to show you what a human does when he finds something he can't live without," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. They moved toward the balcony, the crowd parting like a receding tide before Atticus's uncompromising stride. Outside, the air was crisp, but Elara only had senses for the man beside her. He backed her against the stone railing, his hands coming up to cup her face, his thumbs stroking the edge of her flickering implant with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "Don't hide it," Atticus commanded, his voice dropping an octave as he pressed his body against hers. "It is unsightly," Elara gasped, her hands clutching his lapels for support. "It's a map of where you've been, and I want to know every inch of that journey," he countered, before crashing his lips against hers. The kiss was nothing like the sterile exchanges of her people. It was an invasion and a promise. Elara felt her knees buckle, but Atticus's arm was a steel band around her waist, holding her upright. In that moment, her disabilities didn't exist, only the raw, biological synchronicity of two hearts beating in a frantic rhythm. The piece of the balcony shattered as the heavy blast doors of the atrium groaned. A squad of hegemony enforcers stepped out, their chrome armor reflecting the starlight. The lead officer pointed a pulse baton at Elara, demanding the human release the state property. Atticus didn't flinch. He stepped in front of her, his frame broadening into a combat stance. "She isn't property, and you're about to have a very bad night if you take another step," Atticus said, his voice dropping into a dangerous register. Atticus didn't wait for them to reach him. He became a blur of violent, efficient motion. He closed the gap in 2 strides, his fist connecting with a helmet with a sound like a sledgehammer hitting an anvil. The hegemony relied on energy shields, but they weren't prepared for the sheer, bone-crushing kinetic force of a human. He caught a second guard's arm, snapped it, and used the body as a shield against a pulse blast. "Stay behind me, Elara," Atticus shouted over the din. Elara watched in awe as Atticus dismantled the squad with a terrifying grace. When the last guard lay groaning on the tiles, Atticus turned back to her, his knuckles bloodied and his eyes filled with a wild, protective light. He reached out, grabbing her hand, and pulled her toward the service stairs. "That's the twist, isn't it?" Elara said, breathless as they ran. "You're not just a guest, you're the one they warned us about." "I'm the one who's taking you home, Elara," Atticus replied, flashing a grin. They reached the sublevel hangars where Atticus's ship, a jagged black needle of a vessel, sat humming with idle power. He ushered her inside, the doors sealing with a heavy thud that shut out the sirens. Inside, the ship smelled of oil, old leather, and Atticus. He pushed her back against the bulkhead, his hands finding her waist again. "You're safe now," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "I have never been safe, Atticus," Elara admitted, "but for the first time I am not afraid." "Good, because I've been waiting for a reason to burn half this sector down, and you're the best one I've found," he said, his voice thick with desire. He lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her toward the back of the ship. The transition from the violence of the hangar to the intimacy of the cabin was seamless. He set her down on the edge of a wide bunk, his hands shaking slightly as he began to undo the fastens of her gown. "Let me see all of you, Elara," Atticus groaned, his gaze lingering on the flickering light of her implant before moving down to her soft skin. "Even the scars?" she asked. "Especially the scars," he promised, his mouth finding the sensitive curve of her neck. Atticus's touch was a revelation, not cold logic, but a tactile, visceral hunger. He explored every inch of her body with a reverence that made her feel like a goddess. His hands were rough, yet they moved over her skin with a gentleness that brought a heat to her core. She arched her back as his tongue traced a path down her sternum. "Atticus, I cannot process this," Elara whispered, her mechanical eyes sinking for the first time with her organic one. "Don't process it, just feel it," he replied. He stripped away his own clothes, revealing a body that was a testament to human resilience, covered in old scars and hard-won muscle. When he pressed his full weight against her, the friction was intoxicating. Elara reached out, her fingers tracing the map of his chest. He caught her lips in another searing kiss, his hand sliding down to the junction of her thighs, finding her already slick. "You are so beautiful, Elara," Atticus murmured. "I am yours," she replied. He entered her with a slow, deliberate thrust that drew a sharp cry of pleasure from her throat. It was a joining of 2 disparate worlds. Atticus moved with a rhythmic, primal intensity, his gaze locked on hers as he drove them both toward a precipice. Elara felt her senses expanding, her cybernetics overloading from the sheer intensity of the biological feedback. As they reached the peak of their passion together, the world outside the hull, the hegemony, the politics, ceased to exist. There was only the heat, the sweat, and the sound of their shared breath. Afterward, Elara lay curled into Atticus's side, her head resting on his chest where his heart was finally slowing. "They're going to come for us, aren't they?" she asked softly. "Let them," Atticus said, his voice filled with a quiet, terrifying confidence. "They've never had to deal with a human who has something to lose." "You would fight the whole hegemony for me?" Elara asked. "I'd pull the stars out of the sky if it meant I got to keep you right here," he promised, kissing her temple. He sat up, pulling her with him as he reached for a data pad. He tapped a few keys, and a holographic map of the sector bloomed in the air, filled with human outposts. It was a display of human ingenuity that the hegemony didn't even know existed, a shadow network built by a species that refused to be controlled. "We're going to a place called Nova Terra," Atticus explained. "It's a human colony where nobody cares about your specs, only what you can contribute." "And what can I contribute?" Elara asked. "You've already contributed the only thing I care about," Atticus said, turning to look at her. "You gave me a reason to stop running." He pulled her back down into the blankets. The hegemony might be vast, but they were a stagnant pool compared to the rushing river of human ambition. Atticus wasn't just a pilot. He was the vanguard of a species that saw the broken and found beauty. The journey to the edge of the sector took days. Atticus spent hours teaching Elara how to bypass the ship's subroutines, his large hands guiding her smaller ones over the controls. He treated her mind with the same respect he treated her body, marveling at the way her cybernetics allowed her to see data. "You're a natural," Atticus said, leaning over her shoulder. "It is easier when someone is not shouting that I am a failure," Elara noted. "In my world, the only failure is giving up," Atticus replied, his hands sliding around her waist. He began to kiss the sensitive spot behind her ear, his touch sparking a familiar fire. Elara leaned her head back, closing her eyes. They made love again, this time with a slow, languid familiarity. Atticus was thorough, his mouth exploring every curve until she was a trembling mess of sensation. "I think I was meant to find you," Atticus whispered. "The odds were astronomical," Elara agreed. "Humans don't give a damn about odds," he said, before pulling her into another soul-shaking kiss. When they dropped out of warp, the sight of Nova Terra took Elara's breath away. It was a wild world of deep oceans and sprawling forests. Hundreds of human ships buzzed around a massive orbital station, a hive of activity that felt alive. Atticus took the comms, his voice steady as he identified himself. "Welcome home, Atticus," the dispatcher's voice crackled. "Did you hear that?" Atticus asked, turning to Elara. "He said welcome home." As the ship descended, Elara looked at the sprawling colonies below. There were people of all kinds moving together in a beautiful symphony. She realized the hegemony hadn't just rejected her. They had tried to stifle the very thing that made life worth living, the ability to change and love without boundaries. Atticus landed the ship on a platform overlooking a shimmering bay. He didn't wait for the engines to cool before he was out of his seat and pulling Elara into his arms. He carried her down the ramp, her feet hitting the solid ground of a world where she was finally free. A group of humans gathered nearby, their faces curious but friendly. "This is Elara," Atticus announced to the crowd, his arm wrapped firmly around her shoulders. "And if anyone has a problem with her, they have a problem with me." The crowd erupted in cheers. Elara felt a weight lift off her soul. She looked up at Atticus, the man who had seen a disabled woman and saw a partner. "Thank you, Atticus," she said, her voice clear. "Don't thank me yet," he replied, his eyes twinkling. "The party's just starting, and I still haven't finished showing you what a human can do with a whole planet at his disposal." He led her toward a small cottage nestled on the edge of the forest. Inside, the fireplace was already crackling, and the scent of wood smoke filled the room. Atticus closed the door behind them, locking out the rest of the galaxy. He turned to Elara, his expression softening. "Now where were we?" he asked. Elara didn't answer with words. She simply reached up and pulled him down to her, her kiss a testament to the fact that she was no longer a broken circuit, but a woman who had found her power in the arms of a human. In the years that followed, the story of Atticus and Elara became a legend on Nova Terra. It wasn't just a story of romance. It was a testament to the human spirit's refusal to accept the status quo. Elara became one of the colony's lead engineers, her unique perspective on cybernetics, helping the humans build systems that even the hegemony couldn't crack. Atticus remained by her side, his protective streak never fading. They spent their evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over the bay, the light catching the amber glow of Elara's eye. They were a reminder that perfection is a lie, and that the most beautiful things in the universe are often the ones that have been mended with love. The hegemony eventually sent a diplomatic envoy to Nova Terra. They found a woman who was more whole than any of their pristine aristocrats, standing beside a man who looked ready to challenge a god for her smile. The envoy left without a word, unable to comprehend a society where value was measured by the depth of one's connection. "They still don't get it, do they?" Atticus asked one night, his hand resting on Elara's swelling stomach as they lay in bed. "They never will," Elara replied. "They are looking for equations, but we found the answer in each other." Atticus pulled her closer, his warmth a constant shield. He was a human, a creature of fire, and he had carved a piece of the galaxy for the woman he loved. As Elara drifted off to sleep, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The galaxy continued to turn, but on Nova Terra, the light of human ingenuity and compassion burned brighter than any star. It was a beacon for all the outcasts. And in the center of it all, Atticus and Elara lived a life that was as messy and beautiful as the species that had brought them together.